What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday live stream. Today, we are dabbling with something new today. We've been kind of playing with doing a podcast for a while, and I just realized the logo is slightly off, but Randy, roll that intro.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Seriously Salty Science Podcast. Now I'm all thrown off because it's wrong. Welcome to the Seriously Salty Science Podcast with me, Brandy Can't Be the Fountain, Dev, ReefDudes, and O, Reefing with O.
All right. So how is everybody doing today?
Doing well.
I'm doing wonderful.
Excellent. So in kind of reefing news this week, I guess one of the hot topics that's been going around is talking about salt recently. So there has been some reports of some questionably bad batch of salt, which always sucks for the manufacturer to go through, but it definitely does happen. I have seen it from multiple vendors in the past. And yeah, well, I'm kind of curious to see how this one plays out. So just out of curiosity, what are you guys using for salt right now? And have you guys had any experiences?
I use Tropic Marin
Yep.
Pro. What do you use, though?
I use Tropic Marin Pro, the Turkish version.
Do you guys actually both use it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do
Perfect.
you use, Dev?
I use Brightwell Neil Marine.
Okay.
Okay. So
Yeah, so obviously we talked a little bit beforehand, and I think most people know I had a little bit of an issue at the end of the summer last year and couldn't ever really put my finger on what the problem was. My ICP test came back as having high tin, but nothing else. I couldn't figure out where the tin was coming from. I pulled everything apart. Nothing looked bad. And I at one point, I even told my husband, I'm like, maybe I'm just bad at this. Like, I just could not figure out what the problem is. And so I know, like, it might be an excuse. It probably is an excuse. But the idea that maybe it was the salt and not me doing something dumb actually makes me feel a lot better about the situation. I know a lot of people are really mad about the potential that there could be a problem, though I'm still not convinced that it is the salt. Do not limit my ability to make dumb mistakes.
Well said.
There is no bar.
Sure.
But it gives me some comfort that maybe I didn't do something wrong.
That's a great way to look at it.
I think, man, I probably was going to be so defensive. And I think you just, in that 2 minutes, I think you've convinced me to maybe try something else. I mean, I haven't been having any issues that I know of. And I did do an ICP test. I got the results last week, not because of this. It was just a regularly scheduled ICP test. I mean, a few weeks ago, I did a 100% water change, and I was just telling Greg and everyone how good my tank was looking for the moment. Yeah, I change stuff. I like to experiment, change things. So whenever my tank goes bad, I never look. It's always me. But honestly, I think I'm going to stick with it. I do have Brightwell, like not Brightwell. I do have Tropic Marin, just classic, and I might crack open that bucket. But I have 3 boxes of the Turkish salt, and I think I'm gonna use it until I see something go wrong.
Okay, so first question, 100% water change. One, that is huge. So one of my thoughts is when I see people posting that they had an issue after a water change, realistically, if you do, a 10% water change, the impact should be very low and very minimal. I generally wouldn't think people do 100% water change. So I was actually a little bit surprised when you did that. So that is huge. And that is one scenario where I could actually see, okay, maybe something would happen if something's up with the salt or something was off. But on my tank, if I do a gallon or 2 a day, I don't think I'd even notice a difference because it's such a minute percentage.
I had Euphilia dying, and when I did that, it's before I noticed that I think my clowns, they spawn pretty much every week. And I didn't realize that they like to lay their eggs right within the polyps. Like I have all the Euphilia together on one rock, and it looks like they just go from colony to colony and lay their eggs in between the, and then, with the process of taking care of the eggs and fanning the eggs, cleaning the eggs, they pretty much Euphilia close until, so that was it. I thought I had something bacterial. So that's, my thing whenever I see issues now is not to do chemicals. Is like, hey, you have water, you have buckets. Like, let's just do a bunch of water changes, because you can get whatever was affecting it. You're doing fresh salt water, so
It's true. And if you do have an issue, I mean, that's one way to get rid of it, right? Get rid of all the bad water, replace with the new water. So.
Yeah, I mean, and this is my 3rd or 4th year in the hobby, maybe going on 5. I don't know how long it's been. And there's only been one other time that there was a chemical issue in my tank. It's always been that I have critters irritating my coral or eating the coral. And the only other time my filter stocks got full and my RODI just kept pushing water into the tank, and so it made the salinity drop. So very clear to point to that. But I've never really had, this table is wood, I've never really had major issues other than like filefish or peppermint shrimp or something going after coral till the summer.
Yeah. I mean, so in my experience, generally stuff will be opportunistic if they're hungry. And if you feed heavy, then they tend to be more behaved. So I find in summertime, people are out more, maybe you skip a feeding here and there, or they don't get as much food. They might be a little more opportunistic to start snacking on things.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, every time I've had an issue with an animal eating corals in the tank they were a brand new animal. So I feel like that's a good point, that if I was to ever try something like that, I should probably put them in the sump first and let them get nice and juicy for a week or two before putting them into the actual tank.
Yeah.
New animal, or you're introducing something new. Like, I had a copper band for years, and I love that fish. And then I tried to keep a clam, and of course, one of the things to get my copper band to eat was to feed it like clams on a half shell. And I didn't put, idiotic me, didn't put 2 and 2 together. Like, hey, you used to feed the copper band clam, you introduce a tridacna clam, he's going to think it's food.
Yep.
So I got rid of that copper band.
Dad?
Yeah.
I got rid of that copper band, and I haven't been able to get a healthy one. I've been trying to get a healthy one since then, and they are so hard to introduce them to an established tank and get the other animals to leave them alone, get them eating. That one was swimming with the he was competing for food with the tank. So but he was also one of the first fish I had in the tank. So now with an established tank, it's hard to get one. I don't know. It's just been so hard. I was actually thinking of using maybe, Elliot from Marine Collectors or someone who will get a fish and quarantine and condition them, and maybe they'll be fat enough to kind of, battle with the big boys.
Wait. Sorry, I kind of got distracted. Bert said that Julian Sprung is on Reef Bum. I'm like, I'm going to peace out and go listen to
Hey, enough of that.
Just kidding.
All right.
But he's staying, so we're important. Thank you,
We
Bert.
are important. Thank you.
I saw someone said BRS is Tropic Marin. They're replacing it all. Well, listen, I will take them up on that.
Yeah.
I thought they had already said it, but they said that they just announced. Adam says they just announced it live. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
you know what? It's such a good move by them as a company. Like, if they think there's a problem, to continue to sell the product, or if anybody thinks that there's some questionability in the product, to continue to sell it isn't smart. Like, pull it back, test it, make sure there's nothing wrong. Because the last thing we want to do is kill these like precious endangered animals that many of us have in our tanks.
I kind of, I heard that, and I didn't watch the stream, but I'm not shocked because that's just BRS, right? I think I heard Tropic Marin was going to replace, but I just kind of expected that because it's BRS. Like, I bought mine from BRS, and I never looked into it or thought about it because I'm not seeing an issue, but.
Yeah, so I mean, Tropic Marine's a good brand, right? Like, they make some good stuff, and I've had Lou in the stream. He's a great guy, so I'm not surprised they're replacing it. They stand behind it, and so I think that's awesome. Now, another consideration is, 90% of these companies aren't mixing it in-house, right? It's being outsourced to some other, like, chemical mixing factory to do it, so it's always this tricky thing, right? Because it's not necessarily them that buggered up. It's who they're outsourcing to mix all their raw materials together. So I know every few years you seem to hear some story about a bad batch or something, which sucks, but I mean, it can definitely happen.
So much opportunity for human error in any of this stuff. And like someone said earlier that they felt like a lot of the people were saying that they had high levels of tin. I heard someone else say that too. And I don't know if it's just one or two people and that's blown into everybody. But like, God, if the mixer had a spot on it that was rusty and like there was a couple buckets that got extra tin in it because the giant concrete mixer that it's in was rusty, like it would easily explain the problem that some people are having, some people aren't having. But not saying that's the case. It's just hypothetically.
Yep. Plausible.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so good old salt. So hopefully I'm sure they'll be replaced and hopefully everyone will be good and happy again. I guess the tricky part is, if you've had issues or something died in your tank. But I also know the other part of the tricky thing is people are easy to find something to blame when something happens. So it's, I don't know, 50-50 on that one.
Yeah.
I was just thinking maybe we can have fun with it. Let's make funny videos of what you do with your salt. You got Salt Bay, the guy who was doing the funny thing with the salt.
Salt Bay.
What can we do with our salt? I hope I spark something. Let's do crazy memes with our tropic marine salt.
I think some people were using it for the ice.
For your driveway? Like ice melt?
Yeah, I saw someone, me and O you're in the chat too, Deb. We're in a group chat on Instagram, and someone had posted that they were using it to melt the ice off the stairs.
That is hilarious.
Hey, why not?
Coming again.
It's actually snowing outside the window right now.
Ooh.
Very magical.
I wish it was snowing here.
Yep.
Snow's so pretty.
It is pretty. It's nice when everything's all covered in white. So, in the non-snowy aspect, so one of the dark sides of the hobby, one of the articles actually sent me earlier today was about a guy in Puerto Rico that was smuggling out coral and he got busted for it. So he's now spending the next year in jail for falsely identifying stuff he was shipping out, like Recordias and some other stuff along those lines.
I think I had talked to someone about what's the name of that new Netflix documentary? I think it's The Dark Hobby.
Oh, I haven't watched that one yet. I watched the puffer one recently. That was cute.
Oh, I want to watch the puffer one yet. Still, but The Dark Hobby, all it does is talk about how terrible the reefing hobby is, and how we're all stealing from the ocean and taking too much and collecting animals using cyanide and basically bombing things. And it's people like that they're making those videos about. And it's just such a minimal portion of the people in the hobby who are actually doing that, but it gives all of us such a bad reputation. So it makes me so mad.
Oh, I'm with you, right? Because it's 90% are good, awesome. There's that 10% of bad apples that make everyone look bad. And that's the problem.
Yeah. And then people make decisions and policy decisions that, for instance, the Hawaii ban, that are based off of information that's skewed in a very different direction than what's accurate.
Yeah.
I saw Richard Ross. I forgot he was on someone's stream or podcast maybe a year ago. And he was talking about, I don't think we document or have any idea. Because he said if somebody was asking, how much do you take? We don't have, maybe in Australia they do because they weigh it, but we don't have a good amount of how much we take, or nobody archives that, or nobody collects that, and I think he said the fishing industry does. So if somebody says, hey, how much tons do you pull from the ocean each year? They do have numbers. So maybe we're just in that. I don't know if it'll help our case because I think it's an emotional one, but yeah, maybe that'll help.
I'm all for regulation. I think it's really important that we know what we're doing and that we're not damaging things, right? I love fishing, and even that, if DNR comes and pulls me over, I have to show them what fish I have and what size they are, and I have to know those rules. I don't think there's anything wrong with having some type of metric of what's okay and what's not okay.
Yep.
I don't mind either. I think we just don't, just my opinion, I just think we don't do a good enough job of
I agree.
Highlighting the good things we do. Look at you, Dev. You've gone halfway across the world to do reef replanting in the Caribbean.
Yep.
I remember the scuba diving video. There's a lot of people. I remember, when I was in RAP Chicago, there's a lot of people from the middle of America who don't live anywhere close to an ocean, who care and who know about the reefs and who will plan a vacation to go visit the reefs. And if you give a good enough argument, they might even donate to a cause or buy sustainable fish. Something, those people don't live anywhere close to an ocean, but they know about the ocean. They know about, their kids probably know a lot about fish. So there's a lot of good that maybe we're not.
Oh, for sure. Like even like Jamie Craig's and stuff like that. Like, they're spawning corals and looking how they can use that to like replant the reefs. And when I was helping doing the coral restoration, same thing. Like they're doing coral trees and basically making it so the corals will all spawn together. So those little gametes will go replant and regrow. So there is tons of good that comes from the hobby as well. But you're right. It doesn't get highlighted enough as it should.
Yeah, I was getting onto something too. Like research shows that people don't care about things unless they're directly connected to it. So people aren't going to care about the ocean unless they have some type of connection to the ocean. They're not going to understand the importance of taking care of it and protecting it and doing things to remediate. So having exposure through reef tanks, and which is why I think it's so important that every one of us in the hobby share what we're doing with our friends and family, it gives them that connection. So they're more likely to vote. And unfortunately, money talks, right? And if people don't think it's important, they're not going to vote for funding things, and they're not going to lobby their. It is Brandy Rob. Sorry, I just totally got distracted.
Yeah.
They're not going to lobby their congressmen because they're not going to see the importance of it. So there's definitely an educational aspect of it, and I feel very strongly that because I keep my reef tank, I'm obligated to share my reef tank.
Yep.
And I ask people to come over regularly to just to look at it, because people are always in awe. They're like, "You have shrimp in here?"
Yeah.
Like, you mean those aren't plants? Those are real? Like, and people are just always so fascinated. I think that's important.
And that gives people appreciation, right? Or if they didn't see that, they wouldn't even have a second thought. They're like, "Oh, that's the ocean. That's just water," right? They don't know about the beauty that's there unless they have these experiences to build a connection with it.
Yeah.
Brandy, you just reminded me, like the first tank I ever got was just a Petco 37-gallon or something with a pine stand. And we had it probably pretty much a similar spot to where my Red Sea is now. And when it was just like a side thing, didn't spend a lot of money on it. But when people came over, it's the first thing they gravitated towards. And after a while, that pine stand starts to look ugly. It gets stained. It's not easy to wipe. And that's when my wife said, we got to get a nicer tank, because like it's getting embarrassing when people come over and they're looking at that. And I'm amazed sometimes my friends, they won't come over for a year and they'll remember like, "Oh, that fish is new. Oh, that's cool." Just to go back to the whole lobbying thing, and I don't have any background info. I don't know anybody in the know. But when the whole purchase of BRS, and a lot of people were complaining about just money coming into the hobby. One of my thoughts was like, yeah, there's money in it now. Like there's something to protect. So possibly a big company, you talk about lobbying and stuff and organizing. Yeah. Now there is a vested interest. Someone has money. Someone has a skin in the game. It's not a bunch of small. Well, there still is a bunch of small, but someone has money and something to protect. So they can. I remember a few years ago, BRS did like a drive one Christmas. They had like, hey, any sales that's done between so-and-so, we're donating it to an organization who's going to fight for, I forgot what it was, but I remember BRS doing it. So I just hope that with more money, more established players, more resources, let me not say money, let me use resources, more resources we can be better. Everyone, vendors, partners, hobbyists, manufacturers, we can just be more organized and lobby and present our case.
Well, you got to consider too, all these companies supporting the reefing hobby, if there's no reefs in the ocean, there isn't really a reefing hobby. So, I mean, it's in everyone's best interest to support these things and keep it sustainable, right? Obviously, you're going to have the handful of people that just want the quick buck. But the majority of the people, especially been in it long term, are going to want this to sustain long term. So I think that's a big consideration, which not everyone necessarily considers at first.
And whenever I'm listening to like old school reefers talk or listen, well, I'm not going to say I read some of those old books, but I skim some of those old reefing books. You hear how the scientists were, you cannot keep stony corals in tanks. and it was the hobbyist. Like a lot of the stuff, the fish now that we breed, it was hobbyist breeding. It would so maybe that stuff maybe those stories need to be told better. Hey, a lot of what we learn, a lot of the research I see all the time, research is being done where they're taking corals from, they're trying to get corals that are more resilient to heat and replant them. I just think that those sort of stories should be told better.
Yeah. So on that note, the coral whisperer, Brandy, go on.
Sorry. I think I was actually talking to Richard. I actually told him to buy this book earlier today. Richard Beck from, is that who's doing the Reefs thing right now? Okay.
That's probably Richard.
So I'm talking about you. I told him to buy this, and this is what she talks about. So this is actually about coral scientists, but she talks about, like, she goes around and follows them and talks about how excited they are about the reefs and, like, how much passion they have for it. And I feel like it's one of those things that we're all passionate about the same thing. So it would make sense for us to come together. Richard was telling me about someone in Australia, I think. He sent me the link to his name, but I can't remember his name. I think it started with a V. Hopefully he'll put it in the chat. That was saying that a couple of years ago that hobbyists and scientists have a lot to offer each other, and like that this should be a natural connection that should have already been made. But
100%.
I think we well, I'm out of the know, but maybe I think we do, don't we?
Dr. Charlie Vernon.
Yep.
I think Ecotech funds research. I see Jamie Craig's when I was on Ecotech Experts a lot. So I see, I mean, at least I'm tapped in. Maybe I'm just,
I think the partnerships are happening. That's one of the things she talks about too, about how for a long time the coral scientists were very strict, like maybe like 95% of them were very much conservation, preservation, no intervention whatsoever, and how there's been a turnover recently where they realized that their conservation and preservation isn't enough. There has to be intervention. And I think someone said that a few things ago. Reef Ghost was saying, like, even if we are doing the intervention side of things, putting words in his mouth, kind of condensing, we still have to preserve and conserve, because it doesn't help if someone comes in and dumps oil in the middle of this brand new planted reef. So
100%. Yeah, okay, so Richard was saying he was the former head scientist of Australia who foresaw the Great Barrier Reef's massive bleaching years before it happened.
God, Richard is so full of knowledge.
He is. I know. Okay, so on that note, another really cool thing, because I know Richard was behind this. I don't know if it was in Miami or wherever it was, but I know he did a aquarium, like within the aquarium, basically like a big cylinder type of one that was all done with like aquacultured fish and coral and hobby grade equipment. So it is kind of a cool way of showing like the hobby side of offering it, which is pretty cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I want to see that.
And just
the
another
Frost Science Museum.
Yep, that's the one.
Oh, the Frost. Another lens too is some of these bans have forced us to get creative. I mean, I'm about to get a yellow tang, but I remember one time when that fish was so common that I even gave mine away. It was so, and now they're such a commodity, and now we can actually breed them. I mean, we're at the point where it still costs a lot of money, but
people are willing to pay it.
But there's initiatives now where we are focusing on breeding some of these fish so we don't have to take them from the ocean anymore.
As a hobbyist, I would prefer to buy captive bred fish too, because I'm not going to have any diseases. They're going to be hardier. They're more accustomed to aquarium life. You're not going to necessarily have all those like predations they'd have on certain corals or other creatures that they would in the wild. So I think there's a lot of advantages to buying a captive bred fish in the first place as well. So I think there's definitely a lot of good.
And I'm in the hobby because I love the ocean. The last thing I want to do is mess up the ocean. So I'm really excited about all the aquaculture and captive breeding things that are happening. I think that's huge, and it's a big push forward in science in general to figure out this kind of stuff.
Yep, I see all the time. I hear people talk about they'll get the biota mandarins and they'll eat frozen or pellets almost immediately, which is cool because keeping a mandarin, like a pair of mandarins, is a cool fish, but getting them to eat without feeding them pellets and stuff, it is hard. And the fact that you can get them, I mean, they're tiny, but you can get them and they eat. Yeah, I've only heard good things about it.
Exactly. Like I have a local buddy, and every single fish in his tank is captive bred. He like refuses to buy anything that's not captive bred, which is cool.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. My yellow tang was before the ban, and it was like maybe $30, and he was this little and really cute.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, "You're really going to put a yellow tang in your tank?" Everybody has yellow tangs. And I had no idea that a ban went on, and then like suddenly everybody who came over who's in the hobby was like, "You have a yellow tang?" And I'm like that shift in mindset between when you could have it and you couldn't have it. And I think
isn't that funny how people are like that? Like from common to rare, like overnight.
Yeah.
Like
Reef could have said that people pay it because they want to seem like ballers. Like that FOMO. And I was, it is interesting. That psychology, there's a psychology there. There's a pathology.
100%.
I got rid of my yellow tang because I wanted a gem tang, and now gem tangs are probably easier to get than yellow tangs. I gave it to a friend of mine who I don't think he's here, but he's called Producer Reef, and then the ban was the next time. So I am about to get a yellow tang, and I am super excited to get a yellow tang back. I don't know how I'm going to get him to merge into the main system, but I am excited to get a yellow tang back, and I'm going to keep him. Purple is now $50. Someone, Shumi's just said. Can you imagine? A few years ago, that was a couple, $300-$400 for purple.
It's crazy how it changes, right? It's like what's common, what's harder to get, and like I have a trio of yellows in my water box, and I love them just because that pop of color is amazing, especially when you see multiples swimming around, and they're awesome workhorses. I mean, I've always thought they're really cool fish.
I always thought the yellow tang were like the typical. To me, when I thought of a reef tank, I thought of a yellow tang and maybe a Nemo after the movie.
Yep.
So it was a clownfish and yellow tang. Those were the prototypical reef fish. And yeah, I'm glad now a nice adult yellow tang that's fat, that's healthy, that vibrant yellow. Love it. Love it.
It's good. Okay, so now we're talking about the reefs. One of the other things, Brandy, you're like the information source today. Down in the twilight zone, so 100 to 200 feet down, they actually found reefs down there, which was mainly plate corals, like massive, in Tahiti. So it is cool because one, like there's not a ton of light, 100, 200 feet down. And two, I mean, the one advantage, I guess, temperature-wise, it's going to be a lot more stable down there and less susceptible to the swing. So that's one plus for it. Now, on top of that, it's just the fact that they're surviving. Like, obviously, they're probably bigger, crazy plates because they need all that surface area to collect the little bits of light that they have. But yeah, that's pretty cool. And that's just one that they found out there, which makes me wonder how many other crazy deep reefs are out there that no one's discovered yet, because we really don't know that much about the ocean in the grand scheme of things.
I mean, the one of the articles I was sending you guys on it, because I'm a nerd, was saying that there's only 95% of the ocean hasn't been explored, and we all know this, right? That we know more about the surface of the moon than we know the surface or the bottom of the ocean. So it is really exciting that there might be some like reefs down there that, like, especially in the Indian Ocean where it's just the middle of nowhere, that exists that we're unaware of. And part of me is kind of like, I wish we hadn't have found this reef. Because I think they announced the finding it, like a week or two ago?
Yeah, it's pretty recent.
And I assume that the locals all knew it was there, but I guess from what I was reading, the technology has recently been developed for them to be able to dive that deep for that long. And it was like a 2-mile stretch of just these massive, healthy-looking, colorful corals and fish, and it was just absolutely gorgeous and beautiful.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome, and it's there's just so much cool stuff out there.
Yeah, it definitely makes me excited, and part of me was like, I wonder if they're going to start collecting corals out of there. And then I was like, no, we don't want to collect corals from there. Which is why I was kind of like, maybe we shouldn't have found out.
Yeah, I know. And one of the articles, too, they had the little snippers, a little sample to check it out and stuff. But which I partially wonder, too, how much, like in a reef tank, talk about low light corals, there's tabling in, acroporas and whatnot. They look kind of more like the cat's paw type of one. But yeah, crazy ones like that could just be super duper low light corals and still thriving and happy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they adapt, right? These corals have been around for millions and millions and millions of years, and they've fluctuated and still continue to show up in the fossil record. So it shows a great ability to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely a lot of hope there.
Okay, so what is your thoughts on having hybrid corals and reintroducing them into the reefs? Do you think that stuff we spawn or can potentially genetically modify to be hardier or hybrids and replant it? Do you think that's feasible? I've talked to a couple scientists, and it's been a mixed bag if they think that's feasible or possible or not. So what are your thoughts?
I don't know. Other animals, do you have other animals that you can put back in the wild after they've been domesticated?
Mm-hmm. It's generally not recommended, but
Yeah.
There's shelters and stuff they do that with sea turtles and other animals that have been injured and nurse them back, the sea otters and penguins, and it's done.
Mm-hmm.
My thought process is, one, there's the slippery slope, right? If we do introduce back corals that we've genetically modified or whatever, what happens if they take over and kill out the ones that are there naturally? And my other thought process is, do we have a choice? They're going to die out anyway. I don't think that most coral reefs are the most healthy right now. So I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't want it to be kudzu, but at the same time, I don't want to not have reefs. That's 25% of all the ocean products are generated from reefs, but they only cover about 2% of the ocean.
Most of the diversity comes from reefs. I saw somewhere that, or read or listened to a podcast somewhere where someone said, one type of coral usually wins out in a particular region anyway. You go certain places, you staghorn because that's the dominant strain.
Mm-hmm.
But even more so than a type of coral living, it's just all the animals and other things that support, because we've all seen, I know, Brandy, you've been sending a lot of sciencey stuff, and I think in one of them, it just said when the coral cover declines, or I saw one where it says the urchins, because when the corals go, the urchins leave. And when the urchins leave, a lot of other things leave because then algae takes over. And I think somewhere, again, I don't know if it was in our chat or in the chat that we're in with Richard and everyone, where they did an experiment somewhere in the Caribbean or Florida where they cordoned off 2 different places and put a bunch of urchins. And as it turns out, the places where they put urchins, the reefs started to thrive again, because I guess the urchins clean the surfaces of algae, and that allows coral things to spawn and settle. So that's a long way to say it's complicated, but I don't think we shouldn't try. I'm all for trying. We aquaculture stuff in controlled, or mariculture in controlled environments. Why not take a strawberry shortcake from our tank and try to bring it over across the world, and try to plant it and see what happens?
Yeah.
Shimi made the point about the bacteria and the microbiome. That is something to think about. I just think about New Zealand, right? Where they were having issues with rats that came over on ships. So they introduced the cats, and the cats started killing off all the native lizards and birds. And so it's just this.
What could happen?
How
lionfish are a plague now, right?
Mm-hmm.
In many places.
Caribbean, yeah. In the Caribbean, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's true. We are just even starting to. That's a good point, because we are just now starting to understand the biome in our own tanks. We don't even fully understand. We just now have a test where we don't even know what to do with it yet, Dev. Right? We know we can test, and we know. So, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
And a lot of things to consider.
Yeah.
No, so true. But yeah, no, 100% could take over, which is a risk. But if there's a way to modify them to be less temperature sensitive, And then basically, I think something like that would be a good way to go. I mean, if you're making super corals, you know, maybe they will take over, who knows? But if they're taking over a reef that's already dead and there's nothing else there anyways, then is there really any harm done? I mean, eventually maybe it will propagate out.
Stuff from that area. Like, you know, if we're going to replant an Australian reef, like put corals that were there. I know they've been in a tank environment for years, but put staghorn or Duncans or what, you know, whatever it was that you took from it, put that. Yeah, but I'm just going to dial back what I said and say, hey, I'm just speculating here. I'm not a scientist. I'm pretty sure someone who's a lot smarter than me is going to tell me like in 3 easy ways why that is a absolutely terrible idea and why that's a risk. But
so one thing I think about is the potential of, so the spawning events, right? If we could outplant corals that are native to the environment, I mean, it's the same thing that I've worked with water quality departments, and one of the things that we strive to do was maintain water using native plants. Take the same approach with the corals, use native, which is I think what you're saying. But like trying induce them to spawn, so it's that genetic combination that hopefully makes something that's stronger. Not necessarily that the reef bred one takes over, but that there's some type of interaction that results in a stronger native.
You're absolutely correct, although I thought you were going to go somewhere different. I thought you were going to say spawning, you can recreate or replant a reef a lot faster than you can versus individually planting. But you're right. So you're right on 2 aspects there. You can, and I know Richard.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? I don't hear that very often.
Yeah, I think Richard Ross and Jamie Craggs, there's a few people working on it.
For coral spawning?
Yep.
Yeah, 100%, right? Because you can physically only frag and replant so many fragments that you grow out. Where corals are spawning, it's like a giant snow globe in the ocean of little gammies drifting in trying to find a home to land on. So, I mean, definitely if you get good at spawning coral and using that to replant, I think that's a much quicker path to success, assuming those gammies make it and survive and don't become a fish snack and all that jazz.
That was one of the really cool things in the reef that they found down in the deep ocean in Tahiti, was they got to actually see the whole thing spawn, which is absolutely fascinating. I'm like, oh my goodness, I would love to be there observing that. Like that's better than going to space.
It's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. I've been to a spawning event, seeing corals spawn. It was pretty crazy.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
It was like,
you're like Julian Strayhorn, better than Julian Strayhorn.
it was like diving in a snow globe when it happened. But it's
a little gross.
A little bit when you think about what it actually is.
Do you know what you were swimming through, Dev?
Coral love. The love of the ocean, buddy.
Pollen, allergy season.
Yeah, the love of the ocean. But the thing that amazes me, if you look at the size of like the gammies that come out of them, it's like, how did that even fit out of that polyp? Like, it's amazing that like, bloop, just like popping them out.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question for Reef Ghost. How on earth did he know that I was using a Canon and that the camera turned off? Like, I'm looking around to see if...
I assumed you had the A6000 because I know those had an issue with overheating. But it's normally when recording, though, not when just outputting.
Yep. But he knew. He said, oh, if you're using the Canons, it's 20 minutes and your camera shut off, so it overheated or something. And I was like, so...
In the chat?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
That's good. Probably has the same camera, same issues.
Bert said it's like the people who play in the foam at the beach, like it's a bubble bath bomb.
Yeah.
I've definitely stopped children from playing in that before, and I'm like, you don't understand. That's highly
the skimmer
unhealthy.
of the ocean. Okay, so foam at the beach is the ocean skimmer. That's the only way to put it.
Yep, it's just a bunch of poop.
Yep, just a bunch of
fluffy poop. Don't touch it. And then I think we also wanted to talk about pH, right?
That
Oh,
pH is
pH.
the hot topic lately. I mean, my last week's stream was on pH with Chris, which was a really good one. So if anyone hasn't watched that, you should. And my video. And then I was laughing because BRS did one on calc and pH today. So it's like the hot topic of like, it's been for a while, but lately. So do you guys worry about pH? Do you fight the good battle to up it?
Absolutely. I wasn't able. So I live in an apartment in the Northeast, New York City. We're closed in the winter. I wasn't able to keep anything stony until I started worrying about my pH at all. Like, at all. Like, I'm not saying I'm the best stony coral grower, far from it. But, my pH would go down to 7.6 at night, which, now that I'm using a calcium, I think a few times 7.5, which now that I'm using a calcium reactor, I am like knocking myself. I was like, man, you know how close you were to, like 7.0 where you can actually start melting stuff. But
Sketchy.
over the years, man, I've done like a lot of things. And by the way, I've come to the realization also that pH is really dependent on where you are. Because Dev, you're up in Canada. Like, obviously you can't open your window and your house is sealed for winters. Well, someone else in California, Greg, Carol, maybe doesn't have to worry about it as much. You also hear Jake Adams say he's in Colorado where his air is dry and he evaporates a ton of water, where he can dose a ton of calc. So I think it's really like there's not one size fits all. But I've done the scrubber, which just costs too much money. Then I've tried the scrubber going outside, which works. I think to me that's the best combo. It just still costs a lot of money. But I think using an oversized skimmer with an AC pump and then pulling air from outside with like maybe a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch tube is like the best balance of you don't have a consumable and you still get a decent pH. And then I still do calc. I have a calcium reactor now, which I don't run at night because then that'll drop it too low. And then I do drip some, maybe some soda ash at night. I know it's really sounds overkill, but I'm trying my best to keep it not go below 7.9 at night.
I think one of the things that we were talking about earlier, and Deb was like, keep it for the show. Just like that. Angry voice. It might just be because I'm so new to the hobby, but I came in like, and I don't know if it's just the people that I've interacted with. Like, for instance, I'm really good friends with John Bowie from Clan Mania, and I texted him beforehand. I was like, when did you start making a big deal about pH? And he said 2012 publicly. And like, that's one thing he's always hammered in my head is like, if nothing else, your pH should be over 8. And so it surprises me that it's such a hot topic because, and like I said, it might just be my perspective that I'm so new to the hobby. And just the people that I started interacting with early thought it was really important to begin with. But, it just surprises me how many topics I see on pH because I just feel like it's, in my head, it's common knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, people know it should be, but I think for whatever reason, at least I started obsessing over it probably last summer. And then I've been on this quest to raise it ever since. So, I don't know. I'm probably helping fuel the fire. But there's definitely, I think the people realizing that corals grow faster at a higher pH. Everyone wants corals to grow faster, right? And I think that's a good place to be. Now, I always had low pH, mainly because of calcium reactor, house, CO2 in the air. And I've went to the extremes because I've put on an air exchanger. I ran fresh air up to my attic to get fresh air because I wasn't on an outside wall, and I still run CO2 scrubbing media, but I have it teed off with the outside air, so I don't use as much. It's kind of like Devin's hybrid method and different things. So and then recently calc, which I started dripping calc at night. And then since I started doing that, I've cut the flow through my calcium reactor in half. So I was at 45, 50 mils before. Now I think I'm at 22 mils. So half my calcium reactor, and then the other half is being supplemented reverse light cycle via calc. But I've done so many extreme things. Like, none of them are big and hard, but it's all these little incremental things that slowly add up. And I was laughing today looking at it because my low of last night was higher than the high that I had a few months ago. So it's been like huge because pH is kind of like rhythmic, right? Like each little bump is actually a lot more impact. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, but
I also had a few years ago. I had my windows replaced. My pH also tanked after, so it looks like maybe I was getting a draft. I mean, granted, I could wear t-shirts in the winter now, which is great, but I guess I was getting a draft in. So something as simple like it does. The point I'm trying to make is like pH, I think depending on where you are and every situation is different. You have a couple of cats, you have some dogs, you live in an apartment, everyone's breathing, it could be different. And, you know, you live somewhere where you don't close the windows, where your homes aren't sealed. You use a really small skimmer, that affects how much air is drawn in. Yeah, you keep lower, I keep low, you keep your alkalinity on the 7-ish side, like your pH is a little bit lower versus you keep it at 9.5. So yeah, there's a lot of things that affect it. But right now, yeah, like I said, I'm just using a large skimmer.
yeah,
I'm pulling air from outside. I've taken the CO2 scrubbing off and then dripping calc and just keeping a higher alkalinity. That's kind of the balance I'm trying to. I've seen like some of the research stuff looks really interesting, and I did buy a bunch of stuff. Even like I think Fisher Hex has some research stuff that I bought all of it. Just haven't had a chance to install and experiment with it yet.
Yep, nice. There's sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I wrote down something because I didn't want to forget it, so it's written down, so I'll remember it.
Okay, that's fair. No, interesting thing when I had Chris on last week, he was saying too, like the pH doesn't really, or sorry, the skimmer doesn't really add oxygenation. It helps drive out CO2, which is true, and it's a good way to look at it. It's your water is saturated with what it's saturated, but getting rid of that carbonate is what helps raise your pH because you don't have the carbonic acid driving it back down.
Yeah, I'm not I've seen people sometimes maybe confuse like, hey, like because you have low pH or something, that means you have low oxygen or something, which I don't think those two things are necessarily related per se.
Okay, so Reef Ghost is asking, so what if
I was
you?
about to answer them too.
Yeah, so what if you don't have a skimmer? And a lot of people are talking about the skimmer and CO2, but what if you don't have one? So another big option. So in your tank, you see your pH rise naturally throughout the day through your light cycle because your corals are doing photosynthesis. Now, same thing, if you have a big refugium, you could be running that reverse light cycle and all your algae is going to take over and do the photosynthesis at night. Right, so that's one way to deal with it without a skimmer, is you're basically just offsetting that. So there's always something sucking up CO2 as it grows.
Someone asked what oversized skimmer I have. Right now I'm using a Nios.
Which one?
Before Nios 160. It's on a 70-gallon-ish tank, which is oversized. And then before that I was using like a Royal Exclusive Bubble King, which I think is that one pulled a ton of air. And by the way, my skimmer, because I'm oversizing them, they don't necessarily skim consistently. So I just kind of have to deal with that. That's something I have to deal with, which I'm okay with.
So going back to the question that Reef Ghost asked, one thing that you can do also is just reduce your CO2 in the house, which is make sure people aren't breathing, or like
give all your guests a straw.
We're all have a scoop
to the window
outside. Before I had a skimmer, I had plants like this all around my tank that take up a lot of CO2, and as in return, you're not going to have as much in the water, or that's being absorbed into the water. So that's something that you can definitely do too. Like there's things in your house you can do that are easy and pretty.
So
plus there's.
Can you please tell Matt that I'm never visiting? Because I just make sure people aren't breathing.
It was a joke.
No breathing around the tank, please.
Yeah.
Can you hold your breath when you're looking at the tank?
So Okay, so question. How, I don't know if anyone has any like scientific data on this, but I've always been curious how much plants make a difference. You know, if I have 10 plants around my tank, is there a noticeable difference in pH? And I've always been curious about this. Not that I've tried it. I mean, my wife has tons of plants and, you know, we have them randomly around our house, but I always wonder how much of a difference it actually makes.
I think it also depends on the type of plant, right? Like, because some plants are much better at being a carbon sink than others. And there's some plants that you could put around your tank that aren't really going to take up much carbon from the air whatsoever. Snake plants, which is what this is, take up some of the highest levels of carbon. I don't have the scientific data on it, but I do have anecdotal data that people who have the carbon dioxide measurements in their home, I have a friend who did this actually, and when his carbon dioxide went down, his pH on his tank went up. And it's a logical connection, right? Because your water is a sink for carbon dioxide.
Yep.
So if you don't have as much carbon dioxide that can dissolve into the water, you shouldn't have as much carbonic acid, hence your pH won't be dropping as badly. There's still stuff that the corals are doing, metabolizing, that's causing the pH to drop, but...
I've also heard, I think it's Jake Adams say, just overstocking your tank at night just leads to you have more things breathing, more things using up CO2. I think he also mentioned the fact that, you know, you should periodically clean like your overflow boxes and siphon out detritus because that stuff is kind of alive and it's breathing living bacteria and mold. So I think I've heard him say that, but the overstocking, which is something I am 100% guilty of, always overstocking my tanks. Like
Me too. I think I have 5 tangs, 6 tangs in my water box. Like guaranteed, those are big, heavy breathers that are super active, and I'm sure they're driving down my pH. So, very good point.
Tell them to stop breathing.
Right? Good luck. That
What
usually
about
doesn't end
for
well.
someone who has an all-in-one tank and no room for a skimmer, and probably isn't dosing? Can you think of anything else that would help with pH?
If you had like an air bubbler with like a limewood air stone, the ones that do super tiny microbubbles, if you did that and fed it outside air, I think that would do not as well as a skimmer, but you would get similar benefits because you're dissolving that lower CO2 air into your water, and I think that would help drive it out.
You go. Bunch of ideas.
My kids have a tank in their bedroom, and the pH on that tank is low, but we don't do anything stony in that tank at all. It's all soft corals, and they grow really well. So I think we're not saying it's impossible. It's just more difficult.
So basically know your species, like, right? Have species that can handle the lower pH.
And it'll still grow. It just probably won't grow as fast.
Do your research.
Open the window. Fresh air, you know, fresh air from outside is less than 400 CO2. Air inside a house, at least prior to me doing my air exchanger, was 900 to 12, 13, 1400. Where now with the air exchanger, it's anywhere from 6 to 800. Like, it kind of depends how much I run it and what it's at. But it definitely makes a difference. But yeah, fresh air, huge difference. Like in the summertime, you open up your windows, I'll see a nice big spike in pH.
Is there anything else that I can use to sort of sell getting an air exchanger? Like maybe, hey, high CO2 causes headaches or something?
It does. It 100% does. High CO2 concentrations in your home. It is going to make you sleepy. You're not going to be cognitively, you will not be as alert. So, and there is potential, you know, mental issues kind of long term, or at least like that. So there's tons of good reasons. So
the iron in your blood cells actually bind preferentially to carbon dioxide over oxygen, or no, carbon monoxide. That's different. Never mind.
You don't want your kids having issues with homework. You want them to have better grades. You want them to be more mentally alert. There's lots of good benefits here. It's health for your family, and your tank's a side bonus.
My kids are right over here screaming, and you know, so.
I was like, maybe I don't.
Yeah, he just cracks his CO2 tank open. He's like, "Come sleepy children."
So the thing I wrote down was chasing numbers. So that occurred to me whenever I was after, I was telling you, and I said this earlier, that it kind of surprised me that people haven't been going for over 8. And I remember whenever I first got in, everybody kept telling me, stop chasing numbers, stop worrying about the numbers. And my background is marine biology, geophysics, that kind of stuff. So the chemistry side of things I understand. Theoretically, practically, it's very different in a reef tank. But maybe that's part of it too. And it's, to me, like whenever I would hear stop chasing numbers, it seemed that was like the really strong mentality at one point. And you're in this longer, so you can correct me or not. But maybe that's part of it, is people were so in this mindset of not chasing numbers to the point. But at some point, you need the right numbers, right? It's like you don't want your salinity at 1.007 because you're not chasing numbers.
So I think there's different reasons why they're saying that. Obviously, you want to be in good, happy ranges, and you want your numbers to be in a happy range. I think a lot of the don't chase numbers is if you're obsessing over tiny things, you're messing with your tank a lot, and you're basically killing stability. So stability definitely has its plus side to your reef, right? Corals, everything in life likes stability. It likes, consistency. But consistent garbage isn't going to get you anywhere, right? So you need to stop, not necessarily chase it, but, get to a happy range.
Yeah, there's a healthy place to be at.
Yeah.
I think when you're newer in the hobby, and I'll just kind of see it in just other hobbies, or there's a line of work I do where maybe you don't know what to... I've always heard like more experienced reefers say like, don't chase the numbers or watch your corals, which I think, man, like when I'm new, I don't know what to look for. Mm-hmm. So all I can do is obsess over the numbers. You look at someone, you're like, Brandy, your tank is nice. Like, what's your alkalinity? What's your calcium? And I obsess over the numbers because I'm seeing Brandy be successful. Mm-hmm. Yes, or it's the same thing with equipment a lot of times. Like I see Dev with those Radions, and I'm like, I want a tank like that. So I think the Radions are what got... I don't know what to look for. I don't know when to walk past a Duncan and like know a Duncan is healthy, or, over time you killing enough Duncans, you learn that, but you just... So
that's
I think
a good point.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's one of those advices where you could take it either way. It could be true or not true. Chase the numbers. It's run it up the flagpole. Those business puns. like, I think it's one of those.
Also like, it's the pathology too, right? This is going to be the second time I said that today. Our brain sees a pattern of people who've probably been in the hobby for many years, and therefore they've had time to rack up really expensive, nicer equipment, and they have really big corals growing. So our brain associates the big, nice corals with the equipment, when it's really probably more the time and the amount of effort, and there's a lot more to it than the equipment they have on their tank. So that ability to see pattern might be part of it too. That's a really good point.
I know Shumi had a question about, he's like, it's 10 degrees, and if you're pulling in enough air, does it get your tank cold? I don't know if it's because my apartment is on the warmer side, but I've never had an issue pulling in outside air cooling the tank.
So it will cool your water. I don't know if it's going to be massive amounts, but it will cool it a bit, and you'll probably spend a little more on heating your tank, but it's a trade-off, right? So, I mean, yes, there's an effect. I don't think it's enough to worry about, and maybe cost an extra 50 cents or $1 a month in heating. I don't know the exact numbers, like blind guess. So there is an effect. It's not huge, but there's definitely a bit of an effect. Now, this is a funny comment, Bert. Chasing the numbers story. If I keep my SPS perfect on elk for a year, my corals will turn into sissy corals and die quick if I let those numbers float half a DKH in a day or better. So do you think corals are stronger from dealing with swings, or do you think they'll turn into sissy corals if your tank is dead perfectly stable forever and ever than when they have to deal with the swing? Or they don't have stressors, so they're better able to handle stressor event. What do you think?
I think the ocean is stable, so I'm going to go with the ocean is stable. I mean, I don't know. I think our tank, for even the person who thinks they have perfect alk, I think your tank fluctuates a little bit depending on when you dose, I know we always say isn't that why we always say, hey, test your tank at the same time every day? Because depending on when you dose, when things are happening, your life cycle, it could be a little bit different from time to time. I don't know one way or the other. I know people who I think it's also one of those things where depending on your corals and how mature they are, because I've seen people dose really weird things, but then their tank is mature.
Mm-hmm.
And then me with a new tank, I just always remember the story where this guy was like, I don't use filter socks. Filter socks are the bane in my existence. And I took my filter socks off. My nitrate shot to 100. But, looking in hindsight now, man, that guy had a 10-year-old tank. So it's probably biology could have taken care of any, and he's been running filter sock less for 6 years. So the tank had gotten used to it. So once a year he goes in and siphons out detritus or, whatever it is. But me, it's like that guy has that tank and he doesn't use filter socks. So I don't need to use filter socks. But
yeah, the thing is every tank's different, right? If you are low on nutrients, you probably don't want filter socks. You probably want stuff to break down and add nutrients to your tank, right? Where if you have crazy high nutrients, maybe you want them to remove stuff. So I mean, you can't just look at what one person does. You got to kind of look at the whole picture and how yours correlates to it.
I think there's also a lot to be said to survival of the fittest, right? I heard someone say this, it's not necessarily that all the corals survived and are doing really well. It's that the ones that survived are the ones that can handle those swings. So, and I don't know that you can discount that completely, that you may have had more of your coral survive if you had not had those swings. I don't know. This is all anecdotal on me thinking.
Isn't that what Sanjay does?
Yeah, that's the Sanjay method.
Does. He doesn't acclimate. He doesn't take any special care. He doesn't try to prune. He just puts a coral and the survival of the fittest. Whatever's the fittest survive. He lets them fight it out.
Yep.
And whoever is the fittest survives.
And you end up with someone that's pretty dang hardy. So I mean, there's method to the madness.
Yep. We mentioned earlier how in certain areas you'll find one type of coral win. That's probably survival of the fittest, right? One type of coral probably won that race over, you have a xenia tank. You put xenia in a tank, that thing might win eventually.
Yeah.
Right?
So what Bert said about against the maricultured versus the ones in the hobby, something else I think about is that animals, all critters, right, put their energy towards different things. And I would imagine that a lot of the corals in the wild are probably putting a lot of their energy towards fighting off pests and not looking yummy to the fish. And so the energy expenditure is different, and that's not going to be beneficial in a reef tank. And it goes back to the conversation we were having earlier. Can we put corals that are in our tank back into the ocean? And it's well, maybe because the energy expenditure is going to change, that it might not be the best.
Casey Stunner has a good point. We should really stop comparing the ocean to a glass box. Which is true.
Somewhat agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is the middle. Now, everything in our tanks comes from the ocean. Now, obviously, some of it is bred in there. So we have to consider its natural habitat. Now, that being said, I think any corals that, are F2, 3, whatever, have been tank raised and the colony's been tank raised, I think they're going to be much hardier than a wild collected coral for sure. So they'll definitely be tougher, and I think, most people have better success with that versus, a freshly imported coral that who knows how that's going to play out, right?
That is absolutely true. We also learn, I remember, when I first was looking into reef tanks, Goniopora was something people couldn't keep, and they were just killing them randomly. And I'm watching videos now, and people are growing huge colonies of Goniopora or Gonipora, and they are fragging them, and I remember that was the boogie coral. You can't keep that. That's hard 10 years ago. And now, anybody can keep it.
The funny thing is, I have a bunch of Gonnies in my tank. I do nothing special for it. I broadcast feed the tank, and that's it. They capture some random particles, and then I do nothing special for them.
Mm-hmm. I heard it was feeding. We're not giving it the right particulate food. It's too sensitive. or something. And I don't know if we've just gotten strains that are better equipped, or we just had one person be successful with it, and that person has gotten it to F2, F3, and is now being shared. I don't know what it is, but we were, Ghana, that was one that was a boogie coral, which I assumed 10, 20 years ago. Before that, it was the stony corals, was the boogie corals, and then it's always something until we learn. Hey, before biota, tangs, I've always heard that breeding tangs were impossible, right? Until there was a commercial benefit to doing it. And then, then we figured out how to do it. You cannot get mandarins to eat that until someone got it to do, and then we all replicate, right?
Yep. No, it's true. Robert, Wincy said corals get weak with stability. She said stay in the range. Exactly, like within reason, right? I mean, if your elk was 8.5 and never changed ever, then, maybe you probably would not appreciate a swing. But, within reason, right? You don't want like a couple DK swing. That's obviously bad. But like, 0.3, 0.5 probably isn't a big deal.
And if you probably have a perfect DKH, right? That means your corals probably know what to expect, and then they probably will use their energy for spawning, because then they know they don't have to worry about that or worry about adapting to the environment. Maybe that's when they kind of, focus on spawning. Because my clownfish, like, they're happy, they're healthy. I've had them for years, and they never laid eggs until it got to a point where they're fed. They know they have a meal coming every day, so now they can do energy on spawning and caring for eggs.
It's also interesting because just looking at the animal kingdom, so if you're talking to a gardener and you're like, I don't know what to do, my azalea or my gardenia, or whatever plant it is, just won't bloom. The majority of the time, it's because it's being given a too perfect environment. So, like, it has to have a little bit of stress to induce that reproductive event, because it has to feel like there is some risk to its genetic makeup, right? So there's also that component of sometimes stress is beneficial. Like nothing gets stronger without getting stressed. So
now
there's
on that note, like if a plate coral is stressed, that's often when it will spawn and put out little bud babies, right? So there is certain situations which can induce spawning because of that.
I have a strain of anemones, and whenever I do water change with colder water and do the water change directly in their tanks, you can see it's connected behind me, they typically split. I get splits.
I have to do this. Hey, Greg!
Yeah.
Sorry, every morning when I get on Greg's live stream, he always sounds so excited to see me, and it makes me happy.
You never jump on though, Brandy. You never jump on.
Oh, you mean like on the video? What do you mean?
Oh, in the mornings.
Because sometimes I'm working.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sometimes I have to do work.
Oh.
And sometimes I can do work and have y'all playing while I'm working and nobody notice. But a lot of times I can't. Although a lot of times I can.
Okay.
So, sorry. What were you saying?
No, I was saying, I just do water. Sometimes if I do water change with colder water, the anemone split.
Yeah, I mean, we used to do research with urchins, and to get them to release gametes, this would kill the urchin. But this was for science. We would inject it with saline, which is very stressful / death, and because it was dying, it would release a ton of eggs and sperm. So,
isn't that what they do with tridacna clams to get them to spawn? They take them out and put them out in the water. I think I saw a video from John or someone a long time ago. You put them out and you prepare them to spawn, or you put them in really hot water, or you put them in a specific tank. You
make them think they're dying / make them die, and then they release all their genetic code.
I watched that Superman movie too. Yeah.
I did not. I'm talking for apparently Superman copied science instead of the opposite way.
You mean science and copy Superman? What? How's
Bert wants to know what our biggest issues are.
My biggest issue is always going to be stability because I just change stuff so often. But I don't have any issues right now. I think I have settled on. I'm probably going to be moving very soon. So I've taken some of my, not taken, but some of my, I haven't done much with my tank recently. I'm on a chalice craze now. So they're really nice. So I have like 9 or 10 chalices that I love. But in terms of SPS, I just have Monty's, Bird's Nest. I've clipped a lot of stuff and like kind of banked it with friends. Just in anticipation of me moving and maybe, some risk. But my tank is okay. It's not great, just okay.
Mm-hmm.
My kids' tank is doing great. I mean, the Aptasia doing great. They're loving life. You want to know, Aptasia's loving life right now. So you got that.
So I have the 2 tanks. My big tank, I would say the biggest issue on it right now is that I need to clean the glass more often. It's in a good spot. This one right behind me is a total mess, and part of it is just I don't take the time. It's me. I don't take the time to take care of it like I should. I was all on top of it before I got my big tank, and then my big tank's taken all my focus, and it makes me realize I'm not someone who can have many tanks. When people are like, I have 18 tanks or even 4 tanks, I'm like, they'd all be dead. I'm that's beyond my capability. So
got to stick to 2 tanks. That's the happy number of maintaining without getting too crazy.
yeah.
I think I need one that I can focus on, and then the other one has to be an easy type tank where maybe it's just softies or really easy. Because I've had 3, I've had 4, and it just doesn't work out.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I don't have enough love to go around that much.
Yeah, I don't think I have enough time to do 2. 1 is the sweet spot, but I refuse to give up on this one, so.
That's fair.
How's Dev Tanks doing, though?
So, the tank behind me is currently going through the uglies. It's on the tail end of it. I did break down and threw in some chemi-clean because I was tired of seeing cyano in it. So that, still bits of algae in there. It's definitely starting to tone down, though, but as part of the new tank paying your dues going through the uglies. Now, I have been dumping in some different bacteria products and different things to help deal with it and clean it up. So it's looking much better this week than it was last week.
I should do some bacteria in there. That would probably be helpful.
It can help. Now, the big tank, about a month or so ago, I had a big salinity swing, which wasn't very happy for the tank. Since that's been corrected, I had a couple corals that partially STN'd, and they have since stopped, and they're regrowing back, so that's good. So that was my own stupidity for trying to... Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, really, it's my own fault for, correcting it too quickly. I should have went much slower than I did. But, I mean, the funny thing is, I know that, and I tell somebody that, but, of course, you don't always follow your own advice. Exactly.
Same thing with driving. When people are like, don't overcorrect, I'm like, I'm sure they didn't intend to overcorrect.
Exactly.
Same thing we do with our tanks.
Yep.
I had an issue with, I don't know what it is, what's the issue, but I had burned tips, and I just clipped them. Well, I watched the tips. I left the tips there for a while, hoping that they would grow over. Mm-hmm. And they haven't. But I don't know. I've been liking Bird's Nest. I don't know, man. I've just been liking the classics lately. So I have a piece of the Blue Zing. Well, it's not a classic, but the Blue Zing Bird's Nest from Lazy's Frag House that I got from Billy Pipes a while ago. And man, I've treated this thing so bad. I've had frags here, frags there. Luckily, I cut it up when I first got it. And I finally have it doing well and growing from a sliver because I've killed it down to a sliver and saved a sliver. And looking at it, and it's so nice and blue and so fuzzy. And then I started doing research into the different corals it came from, which I've always been like a thumb your nose at Bird's Nest type person. It's Bird's Nest. But then I decided hey, I'm going to just put the 2 Bird's Nest that spawned to create the so it'll be like a nice story. Like, hey, these two things spawned to create that. And then I just fell in love with bird's nest. I don't know what that was. And then I got a piece of, and I started researching a lot of old school corals, and I got a little sliver of Milka stylo, and I was like, that's nice. And so I don't know, like that's the stuff that's doing well for me. I'm actually trying to hunt down a piece of what's that Monty, that lynx eye cap.
Yeah, going for all the old classics.
Yeah, I had Monty eating nudibranchs, which ate my Monty's back, and I had to chuck all my Monty. So now that I think they're gone, and I bought like a piece of red Monty that's growing, and then I bought a piece of green Monty that's growing, and then I got some branching Monty that's growing. So now I feel like I'm over that hump. I want a piece of a lynx eye cap.
Nice.
Yeah. The way he says bird's nest. I know, because if you had talked to me in person maybe a year or two ago, I would have probably said it disgustingly, like bird's nest.
I really like the Birds of Paradise one, that super fuzzy polyps. I think it's Birds of Paradise. That's my favorite out of all the bird's nest, because it's so shaggy, so fluffy. And if you guys do have that one actually looks its best in lower lighting. So don't give that one too much light, and you'll get way better coloration out of it. Now, I don't know why, but I was just staring at my pH graph on here. So I've been fighting the good pH battle. And for whatever reason, my pH today, since 2 p.m., so the last 3 hours, has been flatlined at 8.27.
Go check the probe.
No, but wow, it's been up and down like crazy. But it's like a perfectly flat line at the top, which I don't know why.
Anytime I see a flat line on my apex, I'm like, I go and like double check the probes.
I know, right?
It might be flat. It might really be flat, but that's crazy and awesome if it is.
Yeah,
I'm using like a couple of pH probes now, because I just had so many extra probe outlets on my hydros that I'm like, let me use 3. Let me see my overflow pH versus my return section pH versus my, I don't know. No difference.
Good to know.
Just one of those things where I just decided, like.
On that note, there was a question earlier in the chat of how much it mattered where you place your pH probe. Now, in theory, it should be the same throughout your tank and your sump, but the one caveat I'd say, if you're checking too close to where you're dosing, then that's going to be so swinging, because it's not going to have enough time to kind of mix in and be fully.
I've also seen issues if it's above where the heater is.
Good to know.
Which I assume is just because the chemistry of it heating up and probably some amount of evaporation going on, and
so mine actually
some weird numbers with my heater
slightly, because when they drip the calc, the one in the return pump section actually goes up a little bit first, and then after a few minutes you see the one in the overflow.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And then the one in the because the way I dose calc is, it's not a constant drip like Dev. I just find that I get too much crust at the end. So once an hour or every half an hour, the pump like doses a certain amount. Like that's the way I do it.
Mm-hmm.
So when it doses, because it drops before the one that's in the return section, it goes after it. So you'll actually see them in concert, like catch up to each other. Like this one first, and then a few minutes later, I guess the tank gets the high pH and it goes down the overflow. Then it goes in the return section where the last one is. So you'll actually see it'll go up by a few points.
It's a couple minute delay.
Yeah, and I knew that it happened first because I just set an alarm for like a high pH swing, and I just noticed. But they end up, once the calc isn't dosing, they end up. I also did the same thing with temperature probes and I was surprised really like how stable the temperature is when you're checking the overflow versus the one thing is I would just put the output of the chiller just to see what the water, and that one was different. It was always different, a few degrees, but for the most part the temperature is stable. I don't know what I expected to learn with that experiment, but the temperature was really stable. Overflow, return section, and the pH was the same.
Okay, now just curious if you tried this, because I've been curious about this. Dripping calc 24/7 or doing like a big dose every 10 or 20 minutes. At the end of the day, is there any noticeable difference other than little mini spikes and levels out?
I think I prefer the dosing once every hour, once every half an hour. I think I see I think I see a bigger dose, a bigger impact that way. It's definitely more stable the way, because what happens is it goes up, and before, so if
All
I
day
don't run
or just at night?
just at no all day.
All day. Okay.
So what'll happen is if I turn it off for a few days, and let's say my pH bottoms out at 7.7, what'll happen is when you dose like 100 mils of calc on the hour, it'll go up a little bit. Before it gets back down to 7.7, the next dose will come up, and that's how you kind of get it to be. Because I know, like, if I don't let my pH drop below 7.9, 7.95 at night, I know it's going to hit 8.2, 8.3 the next day. Right now, my pH is 8.9. 8.9, sorry, 8.0.
Okay. I'm like, that's pretty high.
8.09. So I know it's probably going to bottom out midnight, probably around 7.9-ish. And then I'm going to get up in the 8s tomorrow again.
So I only drip at night. So that way it starts out at a higher number in the morning and has a shorter distance to get to where I want it to be.
So I've adopted the same thing the past week or so, where I used to drip it 24/7, and now I drip it just at night, basically opposite of my light schedule. I started to look at when I'm starting to dip in my pH, and that's when I start dosing. So
basically like how you would do Chaeto or Refugium, opposite lighting. That's how I dose my calc.
Yeah.
I do more at night, probably a little bit. I got to check, but I think I do more at night now because I'm not running my calcium reactor at night. I just have to, and this is where you sort of play mad scientist. I turn off my ATO a few hours before, 4 or 5 hours before I start dripping calc, because I don't want the salinity to shift too much. I know it'll even out. I know, because if my sump is a little overfilled during the morning, when I'm done with the whole bulk calc at night, it'll just evaporate throughout the day and it'll even up. But that's just the mad scientist in me, just, doing stuff like that. But
I felt like I was going to say something else about the calc, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah.
You sort of do the calc slurry, right, Dev?
I was not anymore. Now I'm just doing regular stir through it. I did do slurry prior on the office tank behind me, and then I was doing that with the ice cap, because the ice cap has a little magnetic pill and it will basically make it more of a slurry. And I recently changed it to the Avast Marine one, because the larger one had a smaller footprint, because it's just a cylinder, doesn't have the big square at the bottom. Yeah. So that I could fit my second calcium reactor chamber to get that little bit of a bump back out of that one as well. So
I want to do the exact same thing. I currently have an ice cap, but I want to switch to the Avast.
I use the Avast. I've been using it for years. When I was in Chicago with Alex, he made me this little acrylic thing that actually helps agitate. Like I've crashed my tank with calc water. I've had 2 tank crashes in my entire reefing
It can
career.
be so dangerous.
Yeah. And calc in my ATO, where my skimmer overflowed and the ATO kept dumping calc. So I am not. Yeah. The whole calc. Nope.
If you're going to do calc, do not use your ATO. Use a dosing pump that is reliable, consistent, controllable, predictable. Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. No, but he built me a little acrylic thing, which I zip tied to the stir, which helps to agitate the calc a little bit more. So I do. It's not slurry, but it's definitely a little bit cloudier than what you typically get from the Avast Marine.
Yep.
So what I was going to say earlier, side note-ish, we were watching the BRS live stream earlier, which was talking about calc and pH, and one of the guys actually screenshot it and sent it to you, Dev and O, because I was like, we have to think about the fact that there's people who are at such a basic level of knowledge that we're talking about something and we think we're being simple, it's still over their head. There was a guy on there in the chat who asked about how to get his alkalinity up, that it was like at a 4 and he wanted to get it to 9, and he's like, what do I do? And how much do I dose? And I was like, well, every day you dose and you test and figure out if you need to add more or drop back some. He's like, wait, that means I have to dose calc every day? And it was interesting that, like, we have these conversations, but we never mention the very, very basics of this stuff, is that it's not just overnight or 24 hours a day, but it's every day that this has to be done, because the swings happen every day. So
now,
just something I wanted to point out.
And another thing, it depends. It depends to an extent. If you have a brand new tank with 2 little tiny corals in it, they're not going to consume much, right? You know, maybe dosing once a week is perfectly fine for you. But as your corals grow or as you add more corals, it's going to consume more and more and more. And you're not going to notice unless you test. I generally tell people, if you start noticing, you know, over 24 hours, like at 0.5 DKH swing, okay, you should start dosing, right? If it, you know, takes a week to swing 0.5, you know, maybe your weekly water change is enough.
Yeah. But like, he's wanting to dose calc, right? And it just didn't occur to him that people, a lot of us are doing it every day. And it's also one of the things that I say, I don't test as much as I should, which is why I like all my monitoring equipment so much. But anytime my corals start looking good, I start testing a ton, because they are typically pulling more stuff out of the tank, and I need to get prepared to change what I'm dosing and how much.
Yeah,
you're better than the rest of us, because we only test when things go bad. Whenever you have like a conversation with Joe, who owns Unique Corals, he always says, send off an ICP test when your tank is looking awesome, because at least you have a base. At least you have a baseline for when things are going bad, you know, to compare it to. Because now things are going bad, you don't know. You send it off, you're like, hey, the high iron is doing it, but you're like, your iron was high last time. You have no idea. Like, yes, there's certain elements you do not want iron, and I don't know why I chose that, but it could be, you could look at it and say, hey, like my phosphates are high, but you didn't use. I'm just going to have I hope Greg's not listening. I hope Greg has turned us off at this point, but one of the reasons for my corals not doing well is a few weeks ago, Greg's, I don't have it close, but I bought what is it, sodium hydroxide?
Mm-hmm.
Because I had some zoas. I think you guys remembered in the chat a few months ago, I was like, I've had zoas grow up acros and actually choke them out. I don't know where these red zoas came from, and at first I thought they were cool and cute, but they got to the point now where they're like murder zoas. So I went in with calcium. I think it's sodium hydroxide, which is lye, and it killed the zoas, most of them, but I didn't realize it would have such a huge impact on my alkalinity. I think my alkalinity was huge. And that's probably one of the reasons for my 100% water change, Dev. I think I tried to block that out of my mind. But the thing is, man, it killed everything. Like, the rocks were basically new. Like, there was no coralline cover, like, anywhere I put it. I did kill those Aptasia and those zoas, though.
What's the pH on that stuff, too? It's like incredibly
it's crazy
caustic,
high,
isn't it?
Yes, it is. Okay, so this is like advanced crazy reefer only zone time for a sec here. So any hydroxides are very nasty things. They are extremely caustic and extremely high pH. So if they are magic for upping pH. However, there is definitely a lot of precautionary things with it. Like, one, it is very nasty for your skin or anything they touch. I was dosing potassium hydroxide for a while, diluted down with water, and it was still eating through the connectors on the doser after a couple months. So it can definitely be nasty stuff. So you got to be super cautious if you are using it, and definitely safer the more diluted it is. Now,
I mixed it in a glass container, in a glass beaker.
Did you wear gloves and glasses and a respirator, Walter White style?
So this is probably dark.
Container.
This is probably dark, but I think that this is one of those chemicals that, like, they use in
to dissolve bodies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and they also use it to when I was researching it. One of the reasons it was like, hey, you can also when I YouTubed it, it was like, you can use this to clear your drain.
Yeah, I was watching Ozark or whatever last night. Let's finish that off. And they were like burying some body, and they're like, "Don't forget the lye." I was like, "Yep, there's hydroxides that for you."
Yep.
Yeah, and the fact that people will put it in their tank like in a high concentration. I'm like, unless you're very comfortable with chemicals and potentially getting rid of dead bodies.
So okay,
I mixed a little bit, and I know, like Greg warned me and said, mix it in a glass bottle.
yes, it will dissolve or do nice things to plastic. It will weaken it over time, and it will eventually leak. So okay,
I thought it was only mixing in the glass.
And
you could store
storage.
it in plastic afterwards.
nope,
Yeah.
it'll eat through.
Nope.
Okay.
It
So,
did.
okay. Yeah. Someone in the chat was saying they can make you go blind. Yeah. Bad stuff. So here's the thing. Sodium hydroxide, again, you can dose it for elk and it's magic for pH, but is eventually going to screw up the ionic balance in your tank. Potassium hydroxide, magic for pH, will up your potassium. But if you're dosing it, I did it for a few months and my potassium got way too high. So I stopped using it. There is some other hydroxides, but again, most of them are, yeah, they're very cautious. So it's something that is doable on advanced and big systems, but you got to take a lot of precaution, and it's really just easier to use calc, right? Calcium hydroxide is kalkwasser, which is the safest version to dose, and it's basically supplementing calcium and indirectly alkalinity because it just somehow makes elk afterwards. Mm-hmm. Brad needs our in-house scientist if you have the specifics on it.
On alkalinity?
No. Kalkwasser, calcium hydroxide, is dosing calcium directly, and you're indirectly getting alkalinity out of it. Mm-hmm. There's like a
And I think
reaction
it's
in the
balanced.
tank after. Yeah,
I don't actually know the answer to that.
Yeah.
that's fair.
I think
I'd have to
it
think
actually
about it a little
uses CO2, and that's why you get that bump in pH. It uses the CO2.
So we have carbonic acid in our water, which is basically CO2 and what suppresses our pH. And the hydroxides, I don't know if they bind it or use it up or whatever, but those hydroxides in calcium hydroxide or calc or potassium or sodium hydroxide is they help suck or use or convert or whatever they do with the carbonic acid and remove that from the water, which gives more availability to pH in the water. That's my
I asked this
non-scientific.
earlier,
Yeah.
and I'm sure we probably need to start like trying to like wrap up, but what other industries use kalkwasser? I was seeing, I saw that they use them sometimes in
Canning. Pickling lime.
Yeah, because the original kalkwasser was something, Mrs. Something, pickling lime.
Is that the only thing it's used for?
I'm sure there's other uses.
Gardening for remediation of the soil.
Clearing
I saw
drains.
that they used it in some industries where they have to have really, really hot water for keeping the pH at a certain level, so that it doesn't do stuff, interact with the metals. But I didn't know if there was like any like other big uses of kalkwasser or.
I think it's called. I think
And I
it might
googled
be,
it, and I was just getting a bunch of German websites.
It's a German word, so
Okay, so
I think you might have to Google sodium hydroxide. No, calcium hydroxide. Jeez, now don't Google sodium. Calcium.
okay, so HCP chemistry, you're living up to the chemistry in your name. Calcium hydroxide is also a strong base, and can go blind for life. Don't get in your eyes. Be safe. Wear safety glasses. So there's 2 hydroxide molecules per calcium atom. 1 hydroxide and 1 sodium hydroxide.
It's used in sewage treatment, paper production, construction, and food processing. It also has medical and dental using. For example, root canal fillings often contain calcium hydroxide.
Interesting.
Greg's Coca-Cola plant uses it.
Yeah. Anyways, strong, nasty, proceed with caution. Not recommended unless you've been in the hobby for a number of years and consider
Yes.
yourself an experienced advanced reefer. If you're new, do not touch it. Stick to kalkwasser.
I'm happy with my kalkwasser.
Yep.
Yep.
Exactly.
Even kalkwasser can be
Nasty.
a little. Yes, please be very careful when mixing it. Don't inhale it. Don't go. There was a bad joke coming. I'm not gonna. But don't go.
Burn.
Don't
Yes.
spill it. Don't breathe it. One way or another.
Yeah. The BRS one I like is really like pure, but it's also very, very powdery. The new BRS pharmaceutical grade calc is really powdery.
That was interesting. Today on the live stream, they were talking about how it was the consistency of sugar. And I was thinking, I must not have the same type that they were talking about, because mine's still very powdery.
Yeah,
and
mine is
that's the only
very
Aquaculture
powdery.
I've ever used. So I'm like, I wonder how much more powdery.
You know what
Other
though?
ones are.
I have some. I don't think it's as dusty as some of the other ones.
Okay.
Like it's still smaller, but I don't think it poofs as much, unscientifically. But I don't recall it just because I know, because I have a measuring cup that I leave in a lot of my bags, and I don't think it's like covered in powder as some of my other ones are.
Yeah, I don't think it doesn't poof and it doesn't clump like some of the other ones, but I think you still have to be careful with it, and you can get a lot of it in the air if you're not careful.
Yeah.
One last statement that I want to make sure I make. I was asked, Deb, to tell you that Richard told me to tell you hello on air, and that he loves you in capital letters.
Love you too,
Yes.
buddy.
Hey, one other thing, and I've used this and it works. See, I have my tank in my living room, and if you tip a little bit of calc in your skimmer cup whenever you clean it, it prevents it from going stink. And this absolutely
That's what Greg
works.
just said.
I got the tip from Greg and I use it. So for all of those, I used to be able to sit
Powdered
and you can smell when the skimmer cup is full. You tip a little bit of you'll have to wash it every now and again, your skimmer cup, because the kalkwasser will dry in it. So you'll have to, every couple of months maybe use vinegar to clean your skimmer cup. But it absolutely works.
So I have tried that, and I can't remember if it makes a difference, but I remember doing that for a while, and I haven't done it recently. Maybe I'll start that again.
It works. Even when you're
I'm gonna do
cleaning
that.
it, when you empty it, like you get that big
Just
smell.
put a
I'm
little-
not saying you get no smell. Yeah, I put like a
How much?
teaspoon or something in it. I have a 160, so you know how to
I
to
got one
gauge
of
that.
those.
So yeah, about a teaspoon of calc in it every time I change
I'm
the
gonna
water.
start doing that.
Yep.
Thanks for that advice, Greg.
Speaking of 160 cups, I'm going to try that again. Yeah, it's been ages since I've done that. I kind of forgot about it, so.
Yeah, I've heard of people doing carbon. My wife used to be able to sit in the living room and like, yeah, that skimmer needs emptying. Do it when I go to bed. And
Maybe my fish don't poop as much as other fishes do.
you got the
because
bougie
I don't
fish.
think- Yeah, I don't think mine smells that. Like if I open up my cabinets, I can smell it a little. If I mess with a cup, you can definitely smell it. But I can't tell from the smell that it needs to be changed unless the cabinets are open.
So on mine, because I have the soda lime on top of my skimmer, and it more or less recirculates with fresh air and recirculating. So I don't really smell anything until I clean it. But then when you clean it, open the bathroom window and turn on the fan and for 5
Smells like
minutes or
poop.
so.
Yeah, the Royal Exclusive used to get some really horrible skim made. Yeah. It might also be design also, because I think the Nios, maybe it doesn't let as much. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I know that definitely works. 100% works.
No,
Because I've done it, and my wife is appreciative.
I cleaned mine today. I'm going to throw a scoop in there later and see. I think it did help. I don't know if it was night and day difference, but I think it did definitely lessen it.
All right, so I'm definitely going to get some plants. I don't know what type of plants yet to help
Snake
with my
plant.
Snake does well.
a snake
Also
plant.
called- yeah, that's what this is.
Yeah.
Also called a mother-in-law's tongue plant.
Interesting. Haven't heard that name.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one, but okay.
So snake plants are supposed to be up there on the CO2 absorption plants.
Mm-hmm. They are a sink for some. Actually, some plants are a source for carbon, which I think people don't realize. Like they're like ash and stuff, because when they drop their leaves, it actually puts more carbon into the environment than what it takes out. But snake plants are one of the ones that are a sink, and it's a massive sink.
Nice. So they're your best bang for your buck in sucking out the CO2 in the air.
Yeah, there's a couple like that, but
Excellent.
that's definitely one of them.
Okay.
Okay, so I ordered a Siemens CO2 meter thing, and next on my list is to find an ASM module for the Apex so I can integrate it and have it graph nicely on my Apex. Once
I want to do that.
Yeah. So
That is so easy to do with the hydros, because I think Harry's Aquatics actually sells the things to do that. That's one of the things I've
okay.
been meaning to do. I think it's a little bit more, it's harder to do on the Apex.
yeah, probably.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm
don't
gonna
know how
do
it
it though.
does
I
on
ordered the
GHL.
sensor. So it's happening. I still need to find an ASM module that doesn't require me buying the PMK kit. So we'll see. But it's on my list. But once I do, and once I have this lovely graph and I don't have to check it every day, I'm going to get a snake plant and see if there's any noticeable difference. Like legitly, I'm curious. I'll get like one or two and see, because I'm really curious.
You know what?
I got this one when it was like this big,
Mhm.
and it's probably been 6 months. I have a couple of them in my house, and you see it's not this big anymore. So I don't know how much it's taking up at this size. It's pretty small still, but yeah, I totally want to like get something that I can move around and put it. I have a room that everybody jokes is my jungle.
Mhm.
So when people are like, house plants don't make a difference, they don't have a jungle probably.
Yeah, one plant probably doesn't, but 10 plants probably does.
Yeah, and it really depends on the species. That there is so species specific on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Axadingo, has anyone put skimming under a microscope? I haven't, but I'm going to actually.
I want to now.
I have. I want to get a nice camera for my microscope. I
I have a nice camera for mine.
Oh snap! We're gonna have to have a microscope party stream one day.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I'm in. So okay,
Feeling
question.
so left out.
I'm sorry.
Go
Question.
get one.
Do you use a DSLR on it, or do you have like a microscope USB camera?
I have a microscope USB camera.
Does
I
it
think
work
it's
well?
5 megapixels. It's not as clear as looking straight through it,
Mhm.
but it's clear enough where you can see stuff, which is
Okay.
very
So,
good.
so my issue is when I put my camera on top and I look at the eyepiece, they're not both clear. I have to like pick which one I want in focus, and it's annoying. So I want something where I can see it and the USB is like crystal
So I
clear.
have a microscope that has 2 eyepieces here and 1 here.
Yeah, that's what I got.
And so I focus. I don't know why yours. If it's clear here, it's clear here for me normally.
Because I bought a $20 camera adapter off Amazon, and it's not very good.
Yeah, I got a not cheap microscope camera combination
Okay.
on Amazon Day 2 years ago. And it was like $100 on Amazon Day, but now I think
that's
it's
not
like
bad.
$400 or $500.
Damn.
So I'm sure there's better cameras now, but it was one of those deals that I was like, I am never going to see this microscope at this price again. So
Yeah, it's very, very true. Where do I get my soda lime from? So previously I was using the Two Little Fishies brand because BRS used to have it for like a decent price. And now I don't know if it was a sale price, but it was like 30 something, $40. And now it's $60. So I didn't buy it this time. If you're in Canada, I just ordered a 5-gallon bucket from, I think it was Life Supply, but it was $160 or something like that. But I bought a 5-gallon bucket. So actually yesterday.
Of Calquasar?
No, of soda lime pellets.
Oh.
Carbo
Okay.
lime, whatever it is.
there's still so much I don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
And like it boggles my mind because I started this hobby and I jumped completely in, like, and I still feel like there's so much that I'm just like I can't. It just boggles my mind.
That's
amazing.
why we like the hobby though, because you're always learning.
It's exactly. I love always having something to learn.
You're an engineer. You're a biologist. You're a chemist. You're everything. Like, I am not a handy person. And I learned a little bit of handymanism from this hobby.
Yep.
I had a fridge delivered, and I was going to pay like a plumber a couple $100 to come and install like my ice maker. And the kit arrived, and I opened it, and I looked at it. I was like, babes, this is RODI cable. Push connect, John. I know what to do with this. So we canceled that, and guess what? From drilling, I drilled a hole, put it through, tap my thing. John gets fittings, done. It was much easier to hook up your RO system than that. So, yeah, you're a biologist, chemist. You're like a
Life skills from reefing.
Mathematician.
electrician sometimes.
Yeah, plumber.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Oh, that one too. You've done enough tanks. You've done enough plumbing.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to look up to figure out what model I ordered. I'm trying to see if it's still in my order
Here.
history.
It's just outside my door. I'll grab it and look.
Mine's downstairs.
Yep. If flow dynamics, you're a flow dynamics engineer, whatever that is.
Hydrologist.
Yes.
I have a Swift trinocular compound microscope. SW350.
Wow.
It's $350 right now on Amazon.
I do not see
But
a
I
model
got it
number.
way cheaper than that.
This is the one that I have.
Prime Day.
No idea what the model is, so I'll look it up later. I think it's like a 460 or I don't know, something like that. But yeah, anyway, so I bought the cheap Amazon adapter for my Sony camera, but there's no optics inside or lenses. So I think that's part of the problem. When you buy the official ones, they actually have like a little lens or something inside. So something better, which will be good.
Agreed. The,
Yep.
the model that comes with the camera, so comes with a 1.3 megapixel camera. I think the one that on Prime Day was like a 5 megapixel camera though. But
Yep.
there's all kinds of options.
All right, Chris, how's the pH going? I will show you this just because you're on. One day, so you can see it progressively gets a little bit higher every day. Last night, my low was 8.18, which is pretty awesome. And my high for the last few hours has been sitting at 8.27. Oh, just dropped to 8.26. So it's been doing pretty dang good. So pretty happy so far.
That's so awesome.
You
Yes.
lucky folks.
This is many months of obsession and small tweaks, but it's getting there.
See, I'm in Charlotte, and I keep my back door open most of the time
Yep.
with the screen door, and the tank is right next to the back door.
As good as it gets right there.
Yeah, and there's a little doggy door in the screen door, which is why I leave it open all the time for my dog to go in and out.
Mhm.
My pH normally is around like 8.3, 8.4.
Yeah, that fresh air right there is huge. Really,
Yeah.
it's the more people in your house breathing in a sealed up home is what's depressing most people's pH.
Yeah, I don't have pH issues in the summer really because I can keep windows open most of the time. It's the winter when everything has to be closed up.
Yeah, and on really cold days or if it's raining and I don't want my dog going in and out and I close the door.
You see it?
It drops. Typically not below 8.1 still, but
I stick a hose outside.
see, I don't do any of that stuff.
I get a piece of rigid flexible tubing, stick it in the window. Then I got some insulation and put it in the window. So when the window closes, it sort of closes, but there's still a line going outside. Then outside, if you just stick the line outside, when it rains, you could pull water in. So you know that, what do you call it? The python, the big python, the hose at the end of a python. I sort of stick the hose in. So if it's going to suck rainwater in, it has to suck it through almost 2 feet of a python, which does not happen. So I'm pretty sure, I mean, my building is at the back. No one walks back there, but I'm pretty sure if someone was walking back there and on the 3rd floor, they looked up, they would see this weird thing. It probably was more weird when I was doing auto water changes and I was just pumping water out the window.
Salt water raining on your neighbors as they walk by.
I looked out there one time when it didn't rain for a couple of weeks and there was a ton of salt creep out there. But you know, once the rain falls, it just washes it away. But again, it's New York City. It's the back of the building. It's an alley that no one goes in. Like it's literally closed off. So
they're scared to go there now. Brandy, you're muted.
You're muted, Brandy. Can't hear you.
Dun, dun, dun.
I don't know how I muted myself. I was going to say, I almost said something inappropriate, but I decided I'd keep it for, I'll text y'all after the live.
Saved by the mute. Oh. All right, guys. Well, I think this has actually been way longer than we thought. So we're almost at 2 hours. I think we will wrap it up for today. This is one of the first sneak peek episodes of our likely turning into a podcast, which I misdid the logo, but seriously salty science podcast, where Brandy's basically our scientist and the rest of us are just reefers, but different topics that are reef tank related and semi related. But yeah, no, it should be good. I think we'll have definitely some fun little rabbit holes to go down in the future.
Seriously, salty science. Did that sound cool?
It did. It was awesome. Good work.
Okay, good.
I like it. I like it. I think we should go with that.
Yeah, I think so too. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, as always, hit that like button. When we actually turn it into a podcast and upload it, I will drop a link in this video so it's easier to find in the future. But yeah, all right, guys. Hope you guys had a good night, and we will talk to you guys on the next stream or the next podcast.
Thank
All right.
you guys.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
All right.